So, welcome everyone. I'm Dan Mira, the Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey. And with me is Joe Kane, my colleague, and we have four panelists. We'll be talking about recovery from gambling addiction, about challenges that exist today, stigma, and basically it'll be not entirely a free-form conversation, but we look forward to hearing from our four panelists, and I want to thank them all for joining us. I'll give them each a chance to please introduce themselves. And this is the third of our 5 Problem Gambling Month Awareness Month webinars. You will be able to see the first 2 if you didn't they'll be posted on our website, 800gambler.org, and likewise this and the following 2 will go up on our website. Joe?
And thank you, Dan. I'm Joe Kane. I am a prevention specialist here at the council. Full disclosure, I'm also a compulsive gambler, an alcoholic, and I suffer from OCD. Just want to lay that out there in terms of anything I might bring to the panel. Just to introduce our panelists, we'll just go in order alphabetically. Arunan, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Arunan. I am an addict. I have not placed a bet since March 30th, 2013, and happy to be here today.
Thank you. John?
You're
My
muted,
name is John G. I am a compulsive gambler. I'm also duly addicted with narcotics, specifically benzodiazepines. My last bet and last use is, my last bet was April of 2019. My last use is May of 2019.
Yeah, my last bet is October 28th of 2020. Ron?
My name is Ron W. I'm a compulsive gambler. Placed my last bet October 26, 2015, and very happy to join this meeting today.
Ron, turn your volume up a little bit if you can.
Okay, is that better, Joe?
That's better, yeah.
Okay.
and
I'll just
Walter?
speak up.
I'm Walter G. I'm a compulsive gambler. My last bet was September 25th, 1989, and thank you for having me to be a panelist today.
Thanks for being here. Daniel, I'll kind of let you run the show and I'll chime in with the panelists when I see fit, but if you want to start us off.
All right, so we have a series of talking points that we'll just get into. The first one, and again, for our four panelists, just just jump in as you see fit. So the first point we want to talk about is what led you to basically recognize that you had a problem, or if it was obvious, what was your crisis point in seeking help? And if you turn to 800 Gambler for help, please let us know that.
I could start off, Renes. For me, it wasn't a decision to come to Gamblers Anonymous, to come get help. On March 28th, 2013, I got caught asking my coworkers for loans at my office. My bosses had caught me and kicked me out of the office that day. Didn't fire me, but told me I needed to get help.
Mm-hmm.
I think deep down I knew I kind of had a problem, but I didn't realize how bad or, that I needed to stop gambling. I just was on the impression that, hey, at some point I would hit a winning streak and all the bad things that had happened the 20 plus years prior would just go away. And, I would be on this winning streak where almost like a second job where I would have this extra income. And then, March 28th, 2013 happened, And, to be honest, my girlfriend had no clue what was going on at the time. She just thought, I was bad handling money, and, what turned out to be the worst day of my life at that time on March 28th started me on this process where, knock on wood, for the better part of 9+ years, I've been able to live a healthy, better life.
Thank you. And so you bring up some very important points, and one in particular that we talk a lot about, which is that gambling, problem gambling, or gambling addiction is the hidden addiction. And you mentioned your girlfriend not being aware of your problem. So that's that's an important point. But differing from substance addiction, where over time the use of a substance over a period is going to have telltales. Okay. Any
I'll
of our
get
other
jumped in.
comments?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm Ron W. Yeah, this topic is interesting for me. I think about when did I realize I had a problem? And I'm thinking back to the summer of 2014. And there's a particular week in August, and I lost more money than I had ever lost before, a very large amount of money. And it was like a Friday or Saturday at the end of that week. And I'm walking with my wife, and she's taking me to the back of our house. She's holding my hand, she's walking in with me. And it was my surprise 50th birthday party. And my attitude, I was thinking of the losses and my gambling and my lying at that time. And people who loved me were looking at me, and I felt really low. I realized at that point I had some type of problem, because I wasn't alone anymore. There was my family, my friends, my loved ones looking at me and thinking one thing about myself, but deep down inside I knew what I was up to. And I knew that if everyone knew what I was up to, they wouldn't be back there at my party, wouldn't be there, the love and stuff. So it took me another year of gambling. I still gambled until I finally couldn't take it anymore and fessed up to my wife what I was up to, which was gambling every day and being in that casino every day. And thank God I found, well, I'll talk about later, but that's my introduction about when I realized I had a problem.
Okay, so Ron, so you mentioned your wife, and she didn't really know of this problem, or at least the severity of it. Is that right?
She knew I liked to gamble. She sure knew about that, but she didn't know to the extent of it, and how I was doing it. Every amount of free time that I had, I was gambling, and she didn't know about the numbers that were involved. Yeah, but she knew I was a gambler, and she kind of accepted that. She didn't know it was a problem.
Mhm.
Hey, Dan,
Walter
I'll
or
hop
John?
in. Yes.
So, all right.
The GA Blue Book breaks down, the compulsive gambling and recovery into 6 phases. First, the winning phase, which to me was my smallest phase. The losing phase and desperation phase, which to me, prior to coming to the program, felt like that was how my life was supposed to be for the rest of my life. What brought me into the program was when the rock bottom after desperation phase is hopelessness, suicide, arrest, divorce, drug, alcohol use, and so on. I checked every box. I mentioned in my therapy, my gambling since I was 16 years old up until I came into the program at age 48. I had a definitive suicide plan. I was under FBI investigation for illegal acts that I committed to support both my addictions, both my drug and my gambling. And I owed the IRS money. I wasn't happy. My home life was a Armageddon. I'm married with 4 children, and coming into the program back in April of 2019, truly saved my life. And I've said this to many people before, that I was never happy in my life until probably my second year in the program, which kind of comes with the rebuilding phase and the growth phase of recovery. I am now the happiest person I am in my life. And I'm still pending federal sentencing for the crime I committed. So pre-recovery, if someone was to say to me, they were the happiest person they've ever been in their life and they're awaiting sentencing, I would say that person, was crazy. But I'm not crazy. It's a attestation to the program and the fellowship and, the great benefits that recovery gives us addicts.
So thank you, John. And I want others to know John was open to being interviewed for our newsletter and told his story through that. So I'm familiar with that. And I know you then told me about that you are now, in fact, despite what you're up against, you're happier than you could ever remember being. And that you also, and this is something we may get into a little later, but you sort of a foundation of your recovery is letting people know that you are in recovery from gambling addiction and helping others. So that's part of the reason that we're doing this webinar. So thank you for telling your story before and again now. Walter?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Walter G. I'm a compulsive gambler, and I came into this fellowship in September 25th of 1989. You mentioned about this being a hidden illness. I don't know if it's totally 100% hidden because I didn't know that I had a problem gambling. But one of my sisters told me that, Walter, you have a gambling problem. And I certainly didn't go along with that testament because I would put my hand in my pocket, pull out money and say, I don't have a gambling problem. I have money in my pocket. So whatever time it took, I did a lot of different type of gambling. Whether it was casino gambling, sports betting, or going to the racetrack occasionally once in a while. But I would be at the casino, and the last day that I gambled is the first day that I walked into Gamblers Anonymous. And that day was a day that I won the most amount of money. I had chips in front of me that you couldn't believe. And I had pit bosses and dealers saying, Mr. G, don't you think you won enough money? And you should leave. And yet I didn't leave. And I stayed there until that last chip was gone. And I walked out of there thinking about where I was going to crash my car in the parkway. And how I got home that night, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. But I always remember leaving the casino and seeing signs. And I'm probably going to say it wrong because I haven't seen that sign in over 30 some years. Bet what you had, not over it. But if you need help, call the 1-800-GAMBLER number. So I came into this fellowship, and when I came into this fellowship, I didn't have a problem gambling. I wasn't a gambler problem. What I come to find out is that I was way after that, and I was a compulsive gambler. And one of the things that I've learned in its Gamblers Anonymous fellowship is once a person has crossed the invisible line into irresponsible, uncontrolled gambling, he or she never seems to regain control. And that's when I realized that I was a compulsive gambler. And that's when I realized that I can't gamble like someone else can. And I'm here to work on myself and hopefully, I'm here to share a message of hope to other compulsive gamblers, and that's what I do today. Is a lot of my service work is to try to help spread that message. And Dan, thanks again for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, Walter. These stories are invaluable. You mentioned that your sister recognized the problem before you did, and I have a deeper background working on the substance use addiction issues, and whatever the addiction, person with the addiction is usually quite good at keeping from him or herself the fact of their addiction. So
I'd like to chime in a little bit with my story, Dan.
Please.
My rock bottom has had many rock bottoms, but I think for me, Christmas of 2008, I was a former Wall Street worker, had some very successful years on Wall Street. The accessibility that is out there now for the gambler, especially in New Jersey, which is the wild west of gambling, in my opinion, with all the options we have to gamble, weren't available to me in the 90s and the early 2000s because I was working a lot. But I switched careers, and to hide the hidden addiction, to hide the gambling from my wife, I maxed out about 6 credit cards. So for Christmas of 2008, I had a plan. I just needed to hit the lottery. And I went into my kids' wallets and took a $5 bill from each of their wallets and said, you know what, I'm going to hit the pick 6 and I'm going to make up for this 6-figure debt that I have. That's how insane this illness took me. They do say in Gamblers Anonymous, compulsive gambling will lead you to prison, insanity, or death. I didn't have the job capability of stealing. Otherwise, I would have been ended up in prison. I certainly was insane thinking that $10 in pick 6, I would hit the lottery. I didn't hit the lottery, and a couple weeks later, I came forward to my wife and told her, your Christmas gift is a 6-figure debt because of my gambling. And it took me many years with therapy and in Gamblers Anonymous and on medication to finally hit rock bottom again with another relapse. I told my wife I wasn't gambling and I was gambling. And my wife came out to the car. I told her I was on a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. She saw me playing a slot machine. And the look in my wife's eye, I will never forget. This is October 28th of 2020. It was utter despair, anger, sadness. I thought my marriage was over at that point. You have to stop gambling for yourself. But at that point, I didn't want to lose my family, and I didn't want to lose my ability to be a father to my children, who I hadn't shared to that point that they knew I was an alcoholic. They did not know I was a full-blown compulsive gambler. But that was my crisis point where either I was going to get my wife involved in my recovery and get my children involved and get things going properly in terms of moving forward. But I have had a number of rock bottoms, but I think taking $5 from my kid's wallet and the look in my wife's eye are 2 indelible things in my head that will never disappear.
Thank you, Joe. That it calls to mind there's been more and more media attention to problem gambling, and I just saw something not too dissimilar from that. There's a guy, a rugby player, who got in terrible trouble with gambling, and he's now in recovery, and part of his recovery is going around and talking to students about his experience. And he told a similar story right around Christmas, taking his wife's, I think her wedding ring and the children's gifts for that Christmas and pawning them so he could go place a bet. So very powerful story. So this brings up the challenges. We've seen a tremendous shift of access to gambling. We can now place bets just getting on our phone. It's all too easy to place a bet, which means it's all too easy. It's easier than ever by far to get in trouble with gambling. I'd like to ask the panelists to talk about with this development, with being able to gamble on your phone, and with the bombardment of advertising we see at every turn. We're now, of course, in the midst of March Madness, the basketball tournament, and the ads are rife. They're all over the place. You can't watch a sporting event and not be subjected to the ads. I wonder how that is being in recovery and the added challenge that must represent. So I'll open that up, please.
Yeah, this is Walter. I can start with that one if I can.
Sure.
So for me, the Gamblers Anonymous program teaches me how I need to change the way of how I think, and changing my character. And one of the things that is in one of our steps, which is step 3, is turning our will over to God, to your understanding, and to a higher power. And part of that tells me is that I have to remember that last day that I gambled, or I'm going to forget, and then it leads me back to gambling. So when I see, even before these commercials, because I've been in this program for quite a number of years, I'll talk about the billboard that I would pass by every single day after work, telling me about how much money I could win on the lottery. And when I looked at that billboard, my thinking was, there's not enough money on that billboard for me to win. All it would do is continue the destruction that my life was on the path of. And so when I see these commercials today, are there a lot on there? Yeah, there are. Is there too many? But that's not my, I'm not here to give you an opinion on that. But all I could do is tell you, when I see those commercials, I just think about that last wager that I had, and the pain and all the emotional destruction gambling has caused my life, and how I'm going to develop a better way of life by continually going to Gamblers Anonymous. That's it on that for me, Dan.
Thanks, Walter. So there's not consensus on very much anymore these days, but anytime I tell people where I work, one of the first things they'll bring up is the amount of advertising. And by and large, there is agreement that there's probably more than enough, in particular sports betting advertising. And there's a resolution before the assembly. We'll be testifying on Monday. Our executive director will be there testifying on other bills related to gambling issues, but also on that resolution to curb the amount of advertising we're seeing. Any of our other panelists want to talk about the shift that we've seen, both with the easy access in that we can gamble on our phones and
Dan, this is John G. I'll jump in real quick.
Thanks, John.
It's actually, to me, it's extremely frightening and concerning, the accessibility, especially that young children now have to just gambling by moving their thumb, 15 strokes, and they could lose significant amounts of money. Very concerning, to the point where, I am certainly not a bright individual, but when I hear these commercials about risk-free bets, it scares me that, there are a certain population of people that truly believe that. And my daughter is a college graduate and Dean List recipient, and she came to me one day and goes, "Daddy, I could have a risk-free bet of $1,000." And I just looked at her. I was like, I thought you would know better, but she's book smart. She's not street smart, but
Yeah.
it's very concerning. And we had a new member in the room who said he basically gambled throughout his whole high school career this week. So he was gambling through his phone while in high school, and he graduated high school at the age 21. So to me, the amount that's out there is extremely concerning. But Walter's correct. You need to address the issue is our character flaws and defects. It's not the gambling.
So you bring up a very critical point, and youth gambling is something we're turning our attention to more and more. And I do want to ask you, gentlemen, about what you just touched on, about seeing someone come to a GA meeting and who started gambling as a very young person. So you're not supposed to be able to get on these sports betting apps until you're 21, but as with everything, where there's a will, there's a way. And clearly this one person you mentioned found a way to get online. So it is very troubling. And you mentioned your daughter thinking that there is such a thing as a risk-free bet. And we do see that language too. Some states have stepped in and they basically said that's verboten. You can't talk about risk-free bets because of course there's no such thing. Ronan or Ron, you have anything on the surge of advertising and the ease of access?
Yeah, man.
I'll chime in. Oh, go ahead,
Yeah.
Ronan.
Oh, no, go ahead, Ron. I'll go after you.
Okay, so personally, no, as far as I'm concerned, they could put a casino in front of my house. It wouldn't bother me. In fact, I do have a place. I have a second place where the casino is a mile down the street from my residence. And because I know this just for myself, that I'm powerless over gambling and that I have no control over my gambling, and I have the same amount of control over my gambling as I do the weather or what any of you are thinking about what I'm saying right now. I have no
That's a good
control
line.
over it. So that, and I reinforce that in myself every day. When I speak to other people in the program, I attend meetings, it's constantly reinforced in myself. When I hear the stories of people going back and the absolute destruction that hits them. So when I think of casinos, when I think of online betting for myself, I know it's just nothing but destruction. And I've seen a lot of good stuff in my life happen because I don't gamble. And I've got a lot of friends in the program and just positive stuff. But yeah, I have seen younger people coming into the meetings, teenagers coming in with their parents, telling stories of how all the other kids in the schools are gambling, all the other boys and stuff are placing bets. And a lot of concern, a lot of empathy for people because they don't know the true dangers of compulsively gambling and the destruction that it can lead to. So yeah, I do have concern about society as a whole. Where are we going as a society promoting this gambling, and people, our elected officials and stuff promoting it. But for myself, I keep healthy. I keep healthy every day, and I get my medicine every day by being in GA. And I'm immune to the gambling and the influences one day at a time. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Thank you, Ron.
Hey, Dan, could I add something?
Please.
One of the things that I, as an observation, and years ago when gambling was going to be legal, and all that talk about being legal in New Jersey, that I hear people are going to be coming to these meetings in groves, and they're going to be banging the doors down. Well, that doesn't happen. But what I mentioned to some people years ago is that the destruction of gambling, what it causes or is going to happen sooner to people. Like I came into this program, I would say that an average age of a person entering Gamblers Anonymous was around 29, 30 years old. I was 29. And today, you know, we get to see the destruction happening sooner to younger individuals. And that's what I just wanted to add, Dan.
Thank you, Arun. And you're right, it's happening younger. As we said, so I think John mentioned a guy who gambled throughout high school, and not it's happening sooner, and the debt is greater. I have a nephew who got himself while he was in college using a bookie at a fraternity. He wound up digging a $20,000 hole for himself, which is a lot of money for anyone, but for a college kid, and then you put that on top of, you know, he's got student loans. So that's not a way you want to start your adult life. Joe, I wanted to ask you, because Joe takes calls on the 800 Gambler line and does a great job providing support to people. And if he could talk about, I know we get calls from the gamblers themselves. We've also been getting calls from parents who are calling because they're seeing what their you know, either adolescent or young adult kids are doing with gambling.
And I'm starting to realize, I thought most of the young, and it is mostly young men between the ages of 16 and 21, I thought they were mostly getting their parents' social or an older brother's sibling social. What I'm finding out as I go out to schools as a prevention specialist is there's a number of illegal websites. We knew about the offshore websites, but there's sites, I won't name them, but where you can take real money, cash it in for tokens, which you play with fake, you know, fake tokens, but at the end of the day, you then cash out your tokens for real money. So in all extents and purposes, you're gambling with real money. And I was at a boys Catholic high school 3 weeks ago, talking to the junior and senior classes of about 450 boys. And I asked the classes, how many of you guys are on this app? And about 250, about a little over half raised their hand. So the calls that are coming into the helpline are not only the young men, but the parents blindsided that little Jimmy or Jenny, it doesn't have to be a boy, but mostly has gone into my wallet numerous times and run up credit card debt on these websites or DraftKings or FanDuel, whatever website they went on. And I don't mean to single out, I shouldn't single out any particular business because it's not their fault. It's the young man who stole the credit card. But I definitely see that as our niche age group that's calling in. I would say, not having the statistic in front of me, 60 to 70% of the calls are between 16 to 25-year-old men. We do get, you know, still the gamut of other calls, but as the rest of the guys have said, that's our wheelhouse right now in terms of the calls.
Yeah, and so Joe and I are working with the Market Research Center at Seton Hall to look into the amount of gambling being done by that age group, 16 to 25. And we partnered with Seton Hall last spring on this, and I was just looking at some statistics on that. And it's 56% of the surveyed students said they gamble daily, and the amount they're gambling is not, you know, it's not $5. It's I don't have that stat right with me, but the average amount was significant, and $100 bets not uncommon at all, which might seem surprising, but that's what's happening, and it's only growing. Another of the troubling things we've seen is sports companies and universities partnering, and the sports companies are underwriting the athletic programs, maybe getting their name plastered on the stadium or what have you. New Jersey has just introduced legislation to prevent that from happening at our public universities. That's a good step. Okay, so let's go to another topic is I want to ask about the importance, and you've touched on this already, I think each of you, but if you want to elaborate, we can. How important is it to sort of convey the message of recovery, of being an example of recovery to people who may be in trouble or are in trouble? I'll open that up, and I know that's a kind of a foundation, I think, for any number of people who are in recovery from gambling addiction or other addictions.
I could start on this one. I think it's very important, but I think there has to be a balance there. Like, I can't walk into a supermarket and see somebody buying a lottery ticket and say, oh, just be careful. You don't want to go down a road. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about my addiction if they want or ask for it. I've never been one to just walk up to somebody and let them know that they may have a problem. They might want to think about looking into help for it. But if somebody comes into the program, it's always, I've always been a big believer that, that first meeting is the most important one, but also reaching out to that person after that first meeting to make sure that, they get the message. Funny story, like I have a big problem celebrating my recovery anniversary date, because to me, that's a date that I feel uncomfortable, because it's a date like I became normal, and what I should have been doing all my life, I'm being celebrated for now. And I was told by, a member of the program, that every other day of the program is for me. That anniversary date is for everybody else. So for the newcomer or somebody who's struggling can see me up there and say, hey, if I work the program, someday I could be up there and, have a good life. But again, it's not something I wear on my shirt, say, Gamblers Anonymous, call me with the phone number. But if somebody needs help, I'm more than willing to share my experience with them.
Yes, I know what you're saying. We don't want to come across as scolds. When I went in and spoke to a group of seniors a few days ago, and they play bingo, and there's no harm in playing bingo, and it's just, as long as you do it wisely and set limits for yourself and so forth. This was pretty small stakes, and they didn't feel that I should be talking to them about a form of recreation. So yes, we want to, as we know that most people can gamble and do so responsibly. So anyone else on this topic?
I think it's important. I mean, in both my addictions, if anybody approached me before I was in my desperation phase or rock bottom phase, it would not be relevant. But as Arunan touched on, that first meeting when someone is open to help and seeking help is critical to then, practice step 12 and be of service. And Walter G, who's on this call with us, is a testament to that. The service he gives and what he does for our program and fellowship is immeasurable.
Okay, and so go on. So I think somebody was about to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to add, for me, working at the council is really life-saving. It's a job, I get paid an income, but it's therapy for me to be able to tell my story, and answering the 800 Gambler helpline helps me, because I know that poor person on the other end of the line. I've been in that seat, and for that day, it's not me taking that, who has to deal with the repercussions of the the carnage that they've created emotionally, financially, socially. So working at the council is really a dream job for me because it saved my life, along with Gamblers Anonymous, along with other things I've done, including therapy, medication, self-exclusion, getting my wife involved. GA is at the core, but I have many things. I have a toolkit, and I use them all to one day at a time, not gamble, and it's only for today.
I'll touch on
So-
this. You're making me think about my first meeting, and I learned later that when I walked into that first meeting, and when we all walk into that first meeting, it's the first time everyone knows our secret. You know, all we have to do is open that door, and everybody looking at us knows our secret immediately. And it's a powerful thing, because when I see new people walking in, I have nothing but empathy, and I reflect on the fact that there were people in that room waiting for me when I walked in, and who helped me and gave of themselves and gave of their time. And so I've got to do the same thing, and it's all about giving back, and it's a beautiful thing. And when you see people recover and get better, and not live their lives thinking they have to gamble every day to live.
So related to this, I want to bring up and it's again, one of the sort of driving issues for this conversation is the issue of stigma. And there was a time, and maybe it still happens, that whatever the addiction, there may be a tendency by broader society to judge the person, whereas we want to emphasize that they have fallen into a disorder. Gambling is now in the DSM-5 that and termed a gambling disorder. So we don't want to really judge the person. We want to help the person. So I want to talk about stigma again. That the term was degenerate gambler. Obviously a disparaging term, just like talk about somebody addicted to drugs as a junkie. That there's a negative connotation, certainly. So I'd like to hear from you very much on the on stigma confronting people with gambling addiction, and what we can do, what we can do to change the attitudes that certainly still exist.
This is Walter. So part of the last question and going into the stigma, like Gamblers Anonymous has one primary purpose, and that's to help you stop gambling and then help others do the same. And part of that for me was where I didn't hide my compulsive gambling. I didn't hide from my family saying that I went to Gamblers Anonymous. I didn't hide any of that stuff. And, because I didn't, me and my wife got a phone call one day that from my niece, and was telling us about my nephew's gambling problem. And if they didn't know that help was available, they wouldn't have called us. So, I understand, some people are afraid and, to let people know who they are. But, part of my recovery is letting other people know that, that's something I can't do. And, I'm there to help anybody that needs to help. That's it, Dan.
Thank you, Walter. So, and you're right. So certainly of uppermost importance for the individual is making sure that their recovery is stable, and we wouldn't want to see anyone jeopardize that by speaking openly about their recovery until they're ready to do so. But what you said by making it known that you were in recovery and had a gambling problem. You help somebody in your family, and that, you know, that can ripple outwards. Maybe that niece or that nephew in years to come will be an example to someone, and that's how that works, right?
And I always admired Walter for his just real bravery in the way he carried himself and his anonymity. He would use any chance he could help somebody. His anonymity was not a concern. And I am now in that position, having taken a job at the council. I've given up my anonymity to a lot of people, and it's very freeing. We're only as thick as our secrets. I don't wear a G on my sweatshirt, you know, publicizing it in the supermarket, as Arunan says. But if somebody after a presentation says to me, do you want to, can I have a sit down with you for a few minutes and talk about what GA is about, or talk about what a recovery program is about, or talk about what I might talk to a therapist about, I give them an idea. It's so freeing to give up that that shroud. My kids didn't know I was a compulsive gambler until they were 22 and 24, and that's really you know, I that's just pure ego. I did not want my children to know that their dad was not a superhero, but a frail, a flawed, rather kind but flawed person with some difficulties. And they know everything now about the mental illness, the alcoholism, and the compulsive gambling. So it's it feels much better, to be honest.
That it does, Joe. And many of you have touched on the co-occurring addictions, and if you want to talk further about that, I mean, gambling has long been known to have a relationship with alcohol, but certainly with other substances too. One of our colleagues here was head of security for some casinos, and he's got quite some stories to tell along these lines. So gambling does often take place with either alcoholism or perhaps other addiction. So.
Right, this is Vernon. I'll take the opposite of Walter. I was afraid of the stigma when I first came in. To the point, you know, it was on need to know basis with me. My family knew, my bosses knew, of course, but for pretty much for the first 3 years, I didn't tell any of my friends I was in the program. If somebody asked me, if I was going to a meeting on a Tuesday night and on Wednesday, my coworkers asked me, "What'd you do?" I was like, just laid on the couch, watch some TV, because I was afraid of what they would think, you know, because in my mind, I also had an idea of what an addict was and what their thoughts were. And probably it took me about 3.5 years in the program to finally start telling my close friends that I was in the program. And the funny thing is, I don't want to say they didn't care, but they were supportive. It didn't really change anything, but they got to better understand, like, you know, okay, we can't invite them to go to the track anymore. If we're going on vacation to Vegas, you know, we'll ask his girlfriend, but we know he's not going to go with us. And, you know, it got easier as I told people. And again, I don't wear it on the chest, but if people need to know or it's going to help me, I tell people, to the point that, you know, my friend has a business. I was helping him out one day, and we had a job at the racetrack. We thought we were going to be far away from the betting windows. But when we got there, we were actually right there by the betting windows. And I had to tell his 18-year-old daughter at the time, "Hey, I'm a recovering gambling addict. Here's my wallet. And, you know, anytime I say I have to go to the bathroom, you have every right to tell me to turn out my pockets to make sure I have no cash or no way to place a bet when I go there." But yeah, the more people I tell, you know, the better off it's for me, because that's just more eyes watching me to make sure I don't do anything stupid.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you all. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I see one hand raised. So we'll start with Sherry Walker, you can unmute yourself and like to hear what your question is. Or not. Or you can put it in the mute if you're, I'm sorry, put it in the chat if you're muted. I don't know. All right, seems for whatever reason, I'm not getting Sherry's question. Hello? I don't know. I don't know what happened there. Didn't.
She doesn't have a
Oh,
question.
obviously she had her hand raised, but okay.
No,
All right,
I'd like to add, Dan, the question that I wanted to ask that's in the GA yellow book. And I'm curious to see the answers. And I would think the therapists are curious of what people in the program or compulsive gamblers, what do they think? Is knowing why we gambled important? What do you guys think of that question? Is it something you think about in terms of your recovery? Is knowing why we gambled important? Anybody want to take that one on?
It's Walter, unless you want a therapist first.
No, I was asking just us.
Okay. So as our combo book tells us, is gambling important? And it says perhaps, but in order to stop gambling, it doesn't matter why you gambled. It's a matter of how like, what do you got to do to not gamble? And as myself, as I work through the steps of recovery and I peel back my onion, I got to figure out why I gambled, but it's still not important, the reason why I gambled, but it's staying stopped is what's important.
Yeah, for me, I don't find it important. I have a general idea of why I gambled. I spent 2 years with a therapist, weekly visits, and like Walter said, peeling back the onion. And I have a general idea, but it's not important for me, and I don't dwell on it. It's all about today and just what I can do for myself today.
Okay. So we have a question from Kevin O'Neill. Happy St. Patrick's Day to Kevin O'Neill. And he asks if some panelists can discuss how their gambling affected their jobs and or productivity.
I can certainly start that one. I worked a salaried job for 15 years on Wall Street. And because of accessibility and because of the nature of the fast-paced nature of the job, the gambling was not really a factor. I ran every pool, March Madness, Super Bowl, Masters, World Series pools, but I still did that in a way where it wasn't affecting my job. However, when I went to a commission job and had the free time, if I decided I didn't want to make money and I wanted to bet on the horses, my productivity went to zero when I became a commission employee. So to say it affected my job performance is, I can't put that strongly enough. I was running up credit card debt to cover my credit card bill, my gambling bills, and also my life, because I wasn't making any money as a commission employee in the mortgage business. So it destroyed my productivity and my work ethic.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, my answer is almost verbatim to Joe's. You can't quantify the amount of time that gambling preoccupies your mind, and really the time that you're stealing from a company by preoccupying yourself with what you're gambling on. Are you gambling at work? It's just, it's a horrible, horrible path. And leads to zero motivation, because obviously it's going to end up on the losing end of the stick.
Yeah, I agree with John. The amount of time it occupies your thoughts 24/7, and definitely it did affect my productivity in my life. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
are there any more? Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, for me, my productivity was handicapping the games and not worrying about customers, but just worrying about what I'm gonna bet on.
Can I just add to it too? The thought of my health also comes up when I think about that, and how I was extremely unhealthy with diabetes and overweight and just not living a healthy life. And because primarily the gambling, and that's another way that I was really unproductive.
That's a very good point. And early on, we talked about gambling being a hidden addiction, but of course, it's going to take a toll on us, and the preoccupation, gambling overtaking everything else. I told Joe I might ask that he tells a very sort of lovely story, and a story that really epitomizes a strong recovery, having the option of either watching a ball game or spending some time in a different way. So Joe, this would be maybe, and we're getting near the end, maybe you would just share that story if you don't mind. I think you don't.
I don't. It was just a very simple day to draw a parallel between me as a gambler, having two beautiful kids and a wife that I didn't want to spend any time with. I wanted to be on the computer playing poker or betting horses or doing anything that involved gambling. And fast forward to the last couple of years, when I think for the first time, even though I was abstinent for 10 years before that, I think for the first time I'm in recovery, thanks to a lot of people and to hard work and to a lot of good people is really, and to myself, applying the tenets of Gamblers Anonymous and doing other things as well. But my wife was saying, "You want to watch the ball game?" I said, "No, let's go out and take the dog for a long walk." And we went out for an hour walk, and it was just like so freeing to not care about a ball game, because I am a sports fan, but my wife doesn't need me to sit there and watch sports after all the destruction I've caused betting on sports, watching sports. And one day at a time, I'm going to continue to not put that in her face, so to speak. I'm going to try to be the most balanced husband I can be. We'll be married 30 years in May, one day at a time, because I'm very lucky to still have her. That's it.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you, our panelists very much, Ron and John and Arunan and Walter, some great insights and benefit of your experience can help other people. So as I said, this is the third of our 5 Problem Gambling Awareness Month webinars. I also I'd be in trouble if I don't mention, coming up on June 9th, we have a gala, and we're celebrating Arnie Wexler, who has been a tremendous help to countless people recovering from addiction. So if you'd like to find out more about our gala, please go to our website, 800 Gambler, and you can get tickets and support us in other ways. So thank you all very much, and thank you for joining us, attendees.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hey, Dan, real quick, for the people who are
Yeah.
still on, I just ask all therapists and practitioners, whomever they counsel for gambling, to, in conjunction, refer them to a GA meeting also. I think it would be much better for that person's recovery. to, in conjunction that they're, with their counseling, they suggest a Gamblers Anonymous meeting.
Okay, they heard you. Thank you, John. All right, we'll sign off then.